Thank you, everyone, and it's nice to have you all here. Here we have Lutfullah, our speaker. Uh, Maybe Lutfullah John, you can join us on the stage. Great. So it is good to have all of you. I'm Mujtaba Harris. I'm Afghan journalist and program manager at Journalists for Human Rights. And thank you for joining us today. I want to start by giving a big thank you to everyone here, especially our speakers, my former colleagues at Massey College, my colleagues at Journalists for Human Rights, who helped me to make this event happen. Today I'm both happy and sad as well. I'm happy to see all of you here, especially my fellow Afghans, but I'm also devastated because of today's mark the third anniversary of fall of Afghanistan. Like all of you, I remember the day very well. It's just in a matter of hours, we lost our hopes, our dreams, everything. Many of us fled the country holding on those military flights, but it wasn't just us who fled. The values we hold dear, human rights, freedom of media, freedom of speech, women's rights, and dignity of all Afghans also fled with us. Since that day, 8 million Afghans have been forced to leave Afghanistan, with millions enduring life under the Taliban's harsh regime. They face severe restrictions, economic hardship, and countless other challenges that make their life incredibly difficult. Journalists are facing severe restrictions, and many have lost their jobs, especially female journalists, who mostly no longer able to work. Picture this. You are a young, passionate female journalist dedicated to telling the stories of your fellow Afghan women, reporting on forced marriages and giving them a voice. But overnight, the world is thrown upside down. The Taliban seize power, and suddenly you are banned from your job. Your dream shattered and your voice silenced. After months, you are forced into a marriage without your consent, and you are not just forced to leave your dreams, but also your home and city just to survive. This is the story of many brave female journalists. The stories of these women are just one small one small part of a bigger picture. For the past months, I have interviewed 315 journalists in different parts of Afghanistan, in Pakistan and Turkey. The suffering I have witnessed, the pain that I have documented are unbearable. But at JHR, we believe it's essential to document these challenges. And today, we are releasing our vital report on freedom of media in Afghanistan and the challenges that journalists are facing in Afghanistan and in exile. I know it's hard for all of us to relive those dark days, but it is crucial that we continue to amplify these stories, to advocate and to support who are still suffering. And when it comes to advocating and supporting Afghan journalists, Rachel Palfer, the president of JHR, is one of the best people I can count on. And now it's my great honor to call Rachel a dear friend of Afghanistan and advocate for Afghan journalists and journalists around the world to give a remark. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to our President, Rachel Palfer.
Thank you, Harris. That was very generous. And it is wonderful to be here today with such extraordinarily inspiring colleagues, both from Journalists for Human Rights and amazing Afghan journalists who have done an incredible job ensuring that people have an understanding of what's going on in that country past the fall of the Taliban and what is happening today. So we'll be hearing more about that shortly. But I do have a few prepared remarks. I will work through them fast. I'm seeing some wonderful faces in the audience, people that I've worked with in various ways, but I do need to shout out a few people in particular. We are graced with our esteemed Vice Chair, Peter Dinolo, who is with us today. And sitting next to him is Paul Deegan, who is also a friend and a fearless champion of media here in Canada. So it's wonderful to have Paul. And I didn't expect this, but we have Grant MacDonald in the back, who was the beating heart of our South Sudan program. And it's wonderful to see you again, Grant. And I know you're working hard on behalf of JHR. So. And I would be remiss if I did not also acknowledge Oren Lipman, who was an important piece of powering our Afghan efforts. Very grateful to you, Oren. Thank you for coming. And Oren's very smart son, Kobe, who has an interest in media and showed me a site, groundnews.com, which I'd never seen before, but essentially assesses the bias in news articles. I recommend checking it out. Okay, so many of you know me as JHR's executive director, but in coming back, the board has seen fit to give me this rather over-the-top title of president. I'm hoping that it will usher a new era of female presidents everywhere. But what that means to my mind is essentially making noise and raising funds for what I regard as the most important cause of our time, strengthening journalism, strengthening human rights everywhere that those two things are under threat. So I'm very, very honored and privileged to be back. I was the Martin Wise Goodman Canadian Nieman Fellow at Harvard University this year, so I've learned a lot, and I have met a lot of powerful and interesting new people and engaged with a lot of networks who I am planning to bring so that we can grow JHR to truly the next level. I could not be happier nor more proud to be back serving this incredible cause and this extraordinary team, which the superb Bill Killorn has been leading through this past year. Bill, for his part, is stepping up as well. He is formally becoming JHR's executive director, and that deserves a round of applause. Bill is a compassionate and caring leader, working together and with the engagement, brainpower, and support of so many of you, including key people in this room, we do have the capacity to truly take JHR to the next level. And in this, as some of you know, JHR has been supporting Afghan journalists, as Harris mentioned, and human rights defenders and their families to flee Taliban repression since August 2021. We started with helping 2 families. Then it grew to 10. By the time it was 500 people, I was no longer sleeping. We divided up the work. Bill took over running most ably most of the rest of the organization and did a brilliant job. I, together with Robina Aribois, Jordan McInnes, Zain Al-Maghrabi, and many, many others, including many in this room, focused on facilitating safe passage for those looking to leave Afghanistan. The coalition of organizations working to support Afghan journalists and human rights defenders grew, and it grew to encompass the Globe and Mail, Global News, the CBC, CTV, 3 key anonymous donors, other media freedom organizations such as World Press Freedom Canada, Kira Nazish and her Coalition for Women in Journalism. It grew to encompass women's groups in the Canadian Bankers Association, Unifor, CWA, the Media Union, and 3 ex-commanding officers of the Canadian Armed Forces in Afghanistan, diaspora members of the Afghan community, other veterans, Israel Aid, so many more. Since that time, this coalition, working in constant collaboration and led by JHR, has actually successfully evacuated and resettled over 2,000 Afghans, mostly to Canada. Many of you know Jordan McInnes. Jordan worked intensely and tirelessly around the clock to ensure that every single family on our vetted list was safely resettled. What has happened through her and through all of these efforts, including efforts from all of you, is nothing short of a miracle. I could not be more grateful to Jordan, to Bill, to Zane, to Robina, to Peter Donolo, my board vice chair, and to the women's groups and unions and bankers and veterans, and to all of you who supported that effort. It is a miracle. But this effort also taught me that when people with shared values work together in good faith, we can do the hard things that change destiny and history for the better. JHR's emergency work evacuating Afghan journalists and human rights defenders is, I am very happy to say, slowly coming to an end. But the crisis for media in Afghanistan is far from over. And when it comes to supporting journalists both there and in exile, JHR's work, as Harris mentioned, is just getting going. As you are listening today, I encourage you all to consider what you could potentially do to help JHR meet this critical moment. And that's more than enough for me at this point. So I'm going to pass it on back to Harris, and then we will hear from our amazing panelists.
Thank you, Rachel, and everyone from JHR and our generous donors to evacuate thousands of Afghans. Really was in need, and it's a great honor, and I personally thank everyone. And now, let's welcome Richard Bennett, UN Special Reportage on the Afghanistan human rights situation. Although he cannot join us in person, but he sent us a video message, and I will ask all of you to tune in to Richard's video.
Good morning. Journalists for Human Rights, fellow panelists, journalists and media workers, and other friends joining this event. I apologize for not being able to join you in person due to previous commitments. Thank you for inviting me to this important event on media freedom in Afghanistan under the Taliban control. Today, as we mark 3 years since the Taliban seized power in Afghanistan, it's an important occasion to take stock. I'm deeply concerned about the media landscape in Afghanistan. The situation for press freedom has deteriorated significantly over the past 3 years. In my conversations with journalists and media workers, both inside and outside Afghanistan, they described the many challenges linked with reporting, including threats, harassment, intimidation, and the very real risk of arbitrary arrest and detention and possibly torture. Particularly at risk are those suspected of working for foreign-based media outlets, as well as those who report on sensitive topics, including human rights and the Taliban's appalling treatment of women and girls. The situation is having a chilling effect on journalists and other media workers, and is leading to a climate in which self-censorship is increasingly practiced. Whereas all journalists in Afghanistan face risks in connection with their work, the challenges are even greater for women journalists who face Taliban-imposed restrictions on the way they dress, how and where they are allowed to travel, and how they interact with men. And often they're unacknowledged or uninvited by the de facto authorities. Being a woman journalist in Afghanistan was never easy, but now it's become nearly impossible. I'm therefore extremely pleased to see women journalists represented on this panel. Over the last year, the Taliban has banned certain broadcasters, and in May also banned the participation in discussions and facilitation of another broadcaster. Thus, it's clear that the media-related security concerns extend beyond journalists to their sources and the people they interview. The Taliban often justifies violations of press freedom or freedom of expression by referring to what they call national and Islamic principles and values. Similar wording has also been used to try to justify other actions that are causing the rapid shrinking of civic space, including the banning of publishing and selling of certain books. It would be remiss if I don't also recognize the difficult situation for journalists who've been forced to flee Afghanistan. Many have told me about the difficult life they live outside the country. While there are also some organizations offering support and assistance, much more can and should be done. Further, I want to emphasize the critical role that Afghan journalists and media workers play in the promotion and protection of human rights in Afghanistan. This includes shining a light on human rights abuses, drawing international attention, and, we hope, supporting efforts to ensure those responsible are held to account. Media can also play an important role in countering mis- and disinformation. I am, and I think we all are, often confronted with social media posts that are untrue or videos that do not depict what their description suggests. These fake news items can come from all sides of the political spectrum and can be extremely harmful, with the potential to fuel conflict and intercommunal tensions, threaten human rights, and erode trust in institutions. In such contexts, accurate and quality reporting with truth and integrity is essential. As we mark 3 years since the Taliban took power again, I want to conclude by acknowledging the bravery, resilience, and skill of Afghan journalists amid extremely challenging conditions. It's thanks to their courage and perseverance that we know what is happening in Afghanistan today. And we must match their dedication with increased protection, solidarity, and support. Thank you, and I wish you a successful continuation of your event.
Thank you, Richard, for the video. And now let's open our panel. I will pass to the great Bill Calleran, our executive director, to start, and I'm also keen to listen from our speakers. Over to you, Bill.
All right, thank you very much, Harris, and Harris, thank you for your very powerful words of introduction this morning. Before I introduce our panel, I want to take the opportunity to publicly welcome Rachel Pulfer back to JHR. I can confidently speak on behalf of all of the JHR colleagues in Canada and around the world that we're very proud of what you were able to accomplish the last year in your fellowship at Harvard, and we're very, very excited to learn from that and welcome you back to the fold. So great to have you back in your first official event as president. Thank you, Rachel. And now on to the main event, which you're all here for, to hear from our esteemed panel. I'm very happy to introduce them. Now, I'm going to give a quick bio. All of these wonderful journalists you're going to hear from have an extensive bio. I'm going to give you a very, very abridged version of what they've accomplished, and we can get into some of the accomplishments in it, but in the discussion. But let me begin with Zahra Joya, who is an award-winning Afghan journalist and founder of Rakshana Media, and she's joining us from London in the UK today. Welcome. Next, we have Lutfullah Najafzada, who is also an award-winning journalist at AMU TV, and who has nearly 2 decades of experience working in journalism and has previously led Toho News, which was Afghanistan's largest news operation. So welcome. And last but not least, Shagofa Danish, who is also an established Afghan journalist with nearly 7 years of experience and served as a news anchor and political program host at Tolo News. And since relocating to Canada, served as one of JHR's media fellows and worked for Global News in Ottawa, and is currently the CEO of an advocacy committee for women journalists. So welcome, Shagofa. We have a very powerhouse panel here today, and I'm going to have the opportunity to ask questions, but there is also going to be an opportunity for the audience to ask questions at the end. So as I'm speaking and as they're speaking, think about the questions you want to ask, because we're going to give you the opportunity a little bit later on. But I think it's important, as Richard Bennett said, and as Harris remarked, we are marking an anniversary today, 3 years since the Taliban took control of Afghanistan. I think it would be interesting to start with just opening remarks from each of the panelists and just how you're feeling today as we mark this date. Maybe Shagofa, we'll start with you.
Thank you, Bob. Well, this day is always a dark day for me, and not just for me, but for lots of my colleagues and the generation of Afghanistan who just lost everything in just a blink of eye: their job, their career, their homeland, their country, everything. And I even couldn't, after 3 years, I couldn't believe that we are here and nothing has changed in these 3 years, and nobody is nobody is standing that to say that that's not acceptable for us and for the other Afghans who leave the country or who are still in Afghanistan and facing this restriction, facing the threats. And for me personally, it was affected my whole life, not just my career, but even like coming to this country, leaving the family behind, starting again from scratch. I mean, like you go to school and after that university, making career, everything, and coming back, starting from zero, nothing. And in a country that you don't know nothing about the culture difference, about everything just new. And in the back, you always have a pen that you let your entire relatives, country, everything. So this day, I always remember the time that I just leave the newsroom to get out of the newsroom because everyone was shocked and telling the Taliban's here. The Taliban will come to our office and it's possible in every minute. Just go and leave the office right away. And I was watching people and just read going around right, left, nobody was knowing where to go, where is it safe. And still we carry that pain and we carry the result that lots of Afghan journalists, lots of Afghan young generation, lots of Afghans, they were working in various sections, they just leave the country, and lots of them are stuck in the other countries like Pakistan, Iran, and lots of them are still in Afghanistan but facing challenge. For me, always a painful day, dark day that I will never forget about everything that happened to me and everyone in Afghanistan. So I cannot say more than that about this day. I'm just feeling very bad that this day is the same day that everything changed in my life and thousands of Afghan people.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Shagofa. And I think you talked about a few things that I'd like to pick up as we move on in the conversation. But let's allow Lafula to give some opening remarks on how you feel today.
Well, I feel very good to be on the panel with two very strong Afghan female journalists. This is the face of Afghan media that we fought for it for years, and we will continue to fight for it. I don't think the Taliban will be able to erase that. And I understand the emotion of particularly today, but at the same time, this panel itself is very telling. And it says so much about the resilience, the commitment, and the maturity of the industry of Afghan journalism, that was not necessarily a byproduct of Western presence. This was very much rooted in the Afghan society, and we see that. A lot of pillars of the Afghan society, democratic Afghanistan fell after the collapse of the former republic, but the media is still surviving. Media is still surviving inside the country, media is still surviving outside the country. I think there are more media outlets operating outside Afghanistan that were working ever before. That is, I think, an enormous achievement for the industry. It is difficult, yes. On a personal note, it's very emotional. I don't want to get there. But collectively speaking, the fact that every Taliban atrocity is being documented on a daily basis for the past 3 years, and no Afghan journalist has even taken 1 day of break to stop reporting, to not reporting on Taliban atrocities. This is very, very, very powerful message. You have no example of this anywhere in the world. This is something I think for all of us to note, to understand. This is a sad story, but this is also a success story. I think it's important for us to also see the flip side of the coin as well.
Thank you so much. And let's move on to Zahar for your opening remarks.
Well, thank you very much for having us and organizing this conversation. Can you hear me, yes, clearly?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. So I would like to say, of course, this is a sad day for all Afghans, including myself. But as my colleague Lutfullah said, I think we should remark our resilience as a journalist who continue the work in an extremely challenging situation and bringing lots of information from Afghanistan and telling the world what is happening in Afghanistan and documenting the human rights violation and the Taliban brutal behavior against people. So this is something like very important message to us, especially this day that we are in the same day that we are remarking the 3 years of fall of Afghanistan by the Taliban. So I am really glad, grateful from what the fellow journalists, Afghan journalists are doing these days. It's not easy to be a journalist, and also it's really difficult to be independent journalists and women journalists inside the country. Before, it wasn't easy. Afghanistan was always a very dangerous country for journalists. But nowadays, when the Taliban took power, it's extremely difficult to be an independent journalist and also a female journalist. So I really appreciate that the work of my own team and my colleagues who are working in hiding in Afghanistan and bringing so much stories and news which is untold from the international media outlets. Thank you.
Thank you so much for all of you for your opening remarks. I want to start my line of questioning by delving into something that I think was present in all of your opening remarks, and it's the term journalists in exile. It's a term that we're hearing more and more about these days, certainly in the line of work of journalists for human rights. I think it's important to recognize, and certainly for our audience here and for people viewing online, that our panel here, we're talking about some of the best journalists in all of Afghanistan, but you're all outside of Afghanistan. And Lutfullah, you talked about reporting and holding the Taliban to account, but you're doing that from outside of the country. I'm wondering if you each could talk a little bit about what it means to be a journalist in exile, and how you go about your work when you're not in the country itself. Maybe Lutfullah, we can start with you.
I think a journalist in exile is still a journalist. To me, exile is sometimes very political, and it's not it's not a very healthy attachment to the word journalist. The moment you add exile, then you add certain political connotation to it. So yes, we are exiled as individuals, or self-exiled, or forced to leave our country, or cannot feel safe when we return, and live there. But it doesn't mean that the code of ethics of journalism has changed for us. We're the same journalists. We used to talk to the Taliban before the Americans started. We're talking to the Taliban. We were reporting on Afghanistan, particularly. I mean, the way we have been doing, for the past 2 decades. So to me, in particular, the way we operate when it comes to ethics and values and principles, nothing has changed. But the environment has changed. And the way we operate has changed. We talk about 2,000 plus Afghan journalists who have left the country, but we're still talking about 8,000, 9,000 journalists who are still inside Afghanistan. And that industry is still quite strong. So for one vacancy that we had a couple of months ago, we received 500 resumes. And yes, they need training, they need assistance, they need coaching, they need mentoring, all of that, particularly female journalists. But it would be naive not to see what we have inside the country. So they are the journalists who do the reporting, not necessarily me. I think particularly in my case, I'm here to support those journalists, who are on the ground, provide technical assistance, speak for them in places like this where they can't. But they are the real journalists. They are doing the actual reporting. So that is still in Afghanistan. Afghanistan is not North Korea, where you can hardly find an independent journalist. Zahra mentioned she has a lot of journalists all over the country. We are working with dozens of full-time, fully paid Afghan journalists across the country. So these are realities of Afghanistan. It has, yes, the Taliban is trying to make our life hell. They arrested our colleagues, 23 of them, only in the past year alone. And that's terrible. Some of them were tortured, harassed, and beaten. But what the Taliban have failed altogether is to stop the flow of information from that country. Sometimes we are informed of events that we pick up the phone and call people in Kabul or in Mazar or in Herat and tell them this is do you know about this story? And sometimes we are the ones informing them. Because of that connection between journalists who are living overseas with a large number of journalists who are still in the country. So that connection is still there. And the Taliban, I think, are very determined to stop that, to limit that. But so far, I mean, they have failed. And I think it's our job to make sure this closing space that we have in Afghanistan is not a fully closed space, because that will be when we would not be able to help those journalists at all. I don't believe in two Afghanistan. There's no two Afghanistan. There's one Afghanistan, and that is where Afghanistan is and has been for centuries. So our job, particularly in my case, is to help those journalists, as I said, who are based in the country. Yes, access to information is difficult. I mean, it's a very I mean, we're dealing with the Taliban. I mean, this is no surprise. We've been dealing with the Taliban for a very long time. We were not exposed to the Taliban on August 15, 2021. We were negotiating with the Taliban before that in Qatar and elsewhere. I mean, I lost 11 colleagues to Taliban and Daesh attacks from 2016 to 2021, and we were collecting bodies and so we know who we're dealing with. And I think right now it's very important for us to to learn from 44 years of experience of Iran, from Burma, from Russia, from Ukraine, and to learn from other the Citizen Lab in Canada and JHR and CPJ in New York and Washington and all of that, to see how can we learn new techniques to keep doing what we've been doing, because we are all committed to continue doing our jobs. I think the three journalists that you have on the panel today, I think they resumed their journalistic activities before they filed their asylum papers. So this is something. This is a message of Afghan journalists, I think, for all of us and the international community in particular, that, as I said in my opening remarks, that this is a tragic, sad story, yes. But even before 2021, Afghanistan was the deadliest country for journalists. We lost 100 journalists from 2001 to 2021. It's a different kind of challenge. But we can't say that it was paradise before 2021. So I think it's for us is to empower journalists who are working in exile, who are working overseas, to build their capacity, but in the same time make sure we support journalists on the ground, so they know that they are safe, they know that they are paid, they know that they can access to information in a way that is probably different than what it used to be 3 years ago.
Thank you so much, Lafula. I think it's a strong point to keep in mind that you made about this isn't new. This didn't happen in 2021. These are issues that Afghan journalists have been dealing with for quite some time, and I'm interested in getting you to elaborate a little bit more on what it's like right now as a journalist on the ground. But before we do that, I also want to acknowledge the point you made off the top, which I think is a good one, and something that certainly hadn't really resonated with me before, about the term journalist in exile. Because I agree with you, there is a political connotation with that. So with that in mind, I'm gonna alter my question a little bit as I go to the other panelists and say, moving on to Zahra, as a journalist who is living outside of Afghanistan, can you tell us a little bit about the challenges you face trying to cover your home country?
In a situation where thousands of journalists have been left Afghanistan, and hundreds media outlets have been shut down in the country. Honestly, being a journalist is almost impossible. But for us, I think being a journalist in exile is something like we are standing for our values. Afghan media was one of the big achievements of 20 years of our giant struggle in Afghanistan. So at the moment, all the Afghan journalists who are working outside of Afghanistan, who are still struggling inside the country, they are changing their identity just for one very simple aims to bring stories on the center, and to tell the world what is happening to people of Afghanistan. Afghanistan is a country like have 40 around about 40 million people. So in the sense of the Taliban, they have a very limited right. For example, freedom of speech right is a very meaningless right from the Taliban point of view to the people. So one of the reasons that our colleagues are working very hard from inside and outside of the country is to stand behind our values. So protecting the freedom of speech rights for the people, giving them platform, amplifying their voice, documenting the violation is under the Taliban is all our values and our aim to do. So at the moment, I mean, back to your question, it's really, really difficult, honestly, to get access to information. This is one of the reasons that, according to the one journalist watch reports, it's more than 300 journalists has been tortured and imprisoned in the Taliban during these 3 years. So because why, like, this is a question why 300 journalists have been in the prison of the Taliban, have been jailed because of their activities there as a journalist. Although every year is a very common sense that journalism is not a crime, but from the Taliban point of view, of course, it is a crime. And also, unfortunately, this group is using the media and the technology as a tool to do more propaganda and to do what is to empowering their own narratives.
Thank you so much. And Shagofta, again, I'm going to change the question slightly for you because when you came to Canada, you had a unique experience being able to be a journalist for a Canadian organization, Global News. And I'm just wondering if you could tell us a little bit about what that experience was like, being an Afghan journalist placed in a Canadian newsroom.
Thank you, Bill. Well, actually coming here and being in the newsroom, it was a new experience for me because in the beginning, I haven't that much information about the political system, the culture, the audience of our news in Canada, because we grew up in Afghanistan and we know about our audience in Afghanistan. But when I come here, I was like, in the beginning, searching about everything that was going on in Canada, newsrooms, but still, the rules is rules everywhere. To do your job as an independent journalist, and to say the real stories and to find the accurate information. It doesn't matter if you're in Afghanistan or if you're in any other country in the world. So basically, although I was happy to start again my career here, but I was always feeling about Afghanistan that there's also lots of things going on and we should have more reports on Afghanistan situation as well that was coming out. But I want to add that being here as a journalist and being not in the ground in Afghanistan was a little bit difficult to have access to information sometimes, and also not sometimes, but lots of the times. And recently, our job, I mean, my job as a journalist to have reports on Afghanistan situation or stories that coming was more difficult because the Taliban was limiting the access to information, and lots of people, although journalists in Afghanistan was trying to do their jobs, this is a unique thing that Afghanistan journalists are doing inside the country and outside the country. But still, sometimes we face difficulties because the people was afraid of giving information on coming to media and telling the truth to media, because they were saying back this that yes, this news is going to be published in a Canadian news channel, but what if the Taliban follow this? And what will happen for us if they recognize us that we are saying these stories? Sometimes it was very difficult to find people, and we find the ways to skip to show their identity. But still, I want to add that journalists have a responsibility, a huge responsibility. If they are in every newsroom, they have this responsibility to tell the truths to the people. And I was doing the same. So these rules is never going to be changed. And it was same thing that I was doing in Afghanistan as well.
Thank you so much, Shagofa. And all of you in your remarks so far have mentioned some of the barriers that exist for journalists in Afghanistan. You all have colleagues, friends, family members that are working as media workers in Afghanistan. I'm wondering if you could elaborate a little on that and really help those of us in the audience here and watching online understand what the realities are like of a journalist in Afghanistan today. What are the restrictions on their freedom of expression, on their access to information? Maybe Zahra, we'll start with you this time.
Could you please repeat your question again? I didn't hear.
Yes, so just all of you have mentioned the realities of being a journalist on the ground in Afghanistan today. I'm just wondering if you could elaborate a little bit on that, talking about the restrictions the Taliban have in place on freedom of expression, on free speech, on access to information, etc.
This is really good question. Thank you. Basically, what is going on in Afghanistan under the Taliban rule is something like unacceptable for all of us. But it has been 3 years. People in Afghanistan are powerless. They are silent because of the Taliban spreaded lots of a huge amount of fear among people, and after August 15, 2021, informing about issues that are not describable from the Taliban group's point of view has become a risky business in Afghanistan. The escape of these issues is very, very, very difficult. This issues is from the political issues to terrorism, to corruption, to the Taliban human rights violation. Providing information about women's issue is absolutely is a nightmare for journalists, because the Taliban issued many other orders to put more restrictions on the journalist activities. And at the moment, all media outlets who are operating inside the country, they have a very limited right to be independent. Honestly, this is not something like before. There was every there was lots of rules, principles for the media outlets, but at the moment there is one rule and one principle, which is monitoring and controlling by the Taliban. So even the people inside the country, they cannot criticize on the social media against the Taliban because of the such fear. As I mentioned before, being a journalist who aims to work independently, so they will face torture, jail, and even they will be killed. So this is the situation of the country. That the another issues with the people, they completely lost the right of freedom of expression or freedom of speech. I think this is the right of freedom of speech is very fundamental for every human. Like, we have a common sense that says information is power. I can say after the 3 years, people in my country, unfortunately, they are powerless.
Thank you, Zahra, and thank you for helping us understand not just what it means for journalists, but also the society as a whole when freedom of expression is cracked down on, freedom of the press is cracked down on. Shagofa, anything to add?
Yes, sure. Actually, there is. I cannot say that there is a changes in media outlets because in Afghanistan specifically, uh, because when we want to change something or alter something, we change the method or the way, not the purpose. But you see in the media in Afghanistan that Taliban is trying to limit and have their restriction on every content that media is going to out in Afghanistan, specifically the content which is not same something that Taliban accept that it's critical content or something that Taliban against that thoughts. Uh, we have lots of examples. For example, entertainment, music, entertainment programs are not allowed anymore in Afghanistan. Taliban banned every kind of programs like series, like lots of entertainment programs. Other side, the Taliban all the time is checking the content of media outlets in Afghanistan, even outside Afghanistan. But the thing is that media which is working inside the Afghanistan is there under their control. They cannot escape. So this is the reality that we should know. This is not easy to work under the Taliban and not accept their rules. Although the Taliban is not going to publish some rules like formally in front of the all media, international media, but we all the time when we are in contact with other journalists or some of our colleagues in Afghanistan, they are saying that Taliban intelligence are always looking to the programs, and when they see something critical to Taliban or something that is against the thought or ideology of a Taliban, they have to go to the intelligence. They have to give the response why they did that. Beside that, the Taliban have all the time discussions with the media workers, or sometimes they are just not discussion, but they give orders. Don't do this. Even they have the list of like these kind of words shouldn't be used in your media. If presenter use that, so that presenter with the manager of news would be accountable for that, for the intelligence of the Taliban. It's happened many times, many times. So this is showing that how hard it is working under the Taliban. And this is not just about media in Afghanistan. Sometimes media outside Afghanistan are facing challenge because, like recently, if you heard about what Taliban say to people and journalists, don't talk with Afghanistan International. I know that uh, they said that, but we should keep in mind that freedom of expression should be alive. Everybody should have their rights to say their opinion, even if it's not something same as you want or something in your desire. But this means that the Taliban don't believe in freedom of expression, and every day they are limiting this. And with this limitation and strict rules that the Taliban have on media, of course, it affected the media in Afghanistan, and sometimes media outside Afghanistan is facing more challenge to have their journalists on the ground and to have the all accurate information, because lots of the time when the information is against the Taliban is not going to give that information to the journalists. So they don't see themselves accountable for the journalists. This is right now the very um, important concern for all journalists who are inside or outside the country, because the most important thing is information. If you don't have it, without any accurate information, or investigative reports, how democracy or freedom of expression can be alive. How?
Thank you, Shagofa and Lafula. Any comments on the realities of journalists on the ground in Afghanistan?
Sure. I mean, the list is long. Sometimes I struggle personally what to expect from the Taliban and what not to. It's a regime that has barred up to 3 million Afghan girls from not going to school. So why should we expect them to adhere to values such as press freedom? Taliban, we know them, right? Who they are, how to deal with. Some of the challenges, for example, that are very serious for journalists on the ground is one, that the Taliban operate in silos. So they've come from different parts of the country because that's how the insurgency was run, and they have formed a government. They hardly interact even within themselves. So it's very difficult for journalists to penetrate into Taliban networks and extract information. So access to information is, I would say, number one challenge. Second, for the Taliban, ideologically, I mean, journalism is a state profession. So they don't believe in checks and balances. So it's very hard for journalists to go and demand information on serious topics. If you're a female journalist, you can't go to most press conferences. If you're a female journalist on TV, you can't interview a man. If you're a female journalist, of course, you have certain restrictions in terms of who you can talk to on the street, let alone the way you should dress and cover your face and your dress code. If you're a male journalist, it's not easier either. If you're a male journalist, there are certain topics that are taboo. You can't question the Taliban's legitimacy. You can't go and question a Taliban leader that where is your, why Mullah Hibatullah is not appearing in public? Why is he not accountable? Why is he not allowing girls to go to school? So some of these questions you're not even allowed to ask and raise. So the list of taboo is very, very long. But let's not forget that there's a lot of loopholes as well. So all our websites are closed in Afghanistan. So if our mission is to inform the people in Afghanistan, whether that's Amu TV or Rakhshana or Etlat Rose and others, these websites are blocked inside Afghanistan. So how people, I mean, Afghans hardly use VPN. It's not China, it's not Iran. We don't have that experience and that. And then one loophole that we found was that they don't control the sky. So we're gonna go into the Afghan society via satellite TV. And now that we have a call-in show every morning that a presenter is in Virginia in the US, and people call from every Afghan village, mostly women, and then they directly phone this show, raise their questions, make their criticism, express their opinions, and this is heard all around the country. So this is basically one way to bypass the Taliban firewall, that we can still reach the Afghan people can still reach us. But journalists on the ground are also very successful in connecting us with the ordinary Afghan people. Probably not the Taliban leadership, but I think some of the data that I have, that we interview more local people than probably some of the leading Kabul-based media outlets. So that's why I'm trying to refrain myself from the word exile, trying to do regime change from abroad, sort of preach democracy from 10,000 miles away. So there must be tunnels, underneath, or parachuting from the sky to connect with the Afghan people. And that's what I think some of the Afghan media has been able to achieve that. And journalists on the ground, in the face of all those challenges, they have been able to maintain and connect us with local voices throughout the country. Let me give you an interesting example. When we were in Kabul, Shigufa, a bomb was going off. And then the first question we were asking, how many people died? And then we were saying, 5 people. I was thinking, it's not a story. And now we do breaking story, breaking news, if a shopkeeper is arrested in Panjshir, right? So our interest in human rights, I think in human rights reporting in particular, has increased probably tenfold. Also because of, it was also a bandwidth issue, but at the same time a capacity and interest issue. So it's a very complex, the way I think the modus operandi has changed in a way that journalists basically focus on certain things. We are probably not focusing a lot on security, but there are so many other areas. I think that the journalists, inside the country as well as those outside the country, are still reporting.
I think that was a fascinating answer, and I think you made a really important point, and certainly something that Journalists for Human Rights really believes in is supporting journalists who are operating outside of their home countries because of the power they have reaching not only the diaspora, but also the people within Afghanistan in this example. You still have the opportunity to report accurate, truthful information to them, and that's why we're so proud as an organization to support journalists like yourselves. I know Zahra has an appointment that she needs to run to, so just maybe we'll just take a quick pause from the panel discussion and turn it over to Zahra for any final words from you.
Thank you so much, and I do apologize for this time limitation. I have another commitment and I have to leave sooner. So I would like to say journalism is something very important tool in this conflict world that we are all living in a very conflict time, actually, from Afghanistan to Gaza to Ukraine, to the other countries. But still, it's journalists who are sacrificing, who are commitment for bringing news and freedom of and defending the freedom of speech, and also trying to at least be the voice of those who have been silent. So this is really, really important, and the journalists are playing a crucial role. So I would like to conclude with this word that we need your support in any stage, from helping our journalists who are stuck in the countries like Pakistan and Iran, until to giving platform for the other fellow journalists who needs to be on the board and amplifying the voice of people who will left behind. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Zahra, and thank you for joining us today. We're very grateful for your time and for your contributions to the discussion this morning. Before we turn it over to audience questions, and this is a signal for you to start thinking about what you want to ask, I want to pick up on something that you said, Lutfola, and allow Shigufa to weigh in, and that's the reality for female journalists in Afghanistan. I think one thing that certainly Journalists for Human Rights is aware of in our work around the world, often, in most cases, the realities of male and female journalists are quite different. So I wanted to give you an opportunity to weigh in and help us understand what it's like for female journalists.
Well, as my colleague Lutfullah mentioned, it's not easy for men and women both to work as a journalist in Afghanistan. We had all the time this threat. I remember when I was a news anchor at Toulon News, uh, we were changing all the time our schedule, coming to office and going back. We were changing the doors that we left the office or coming to the office. We changed our car. We never went to one car specifically. This was because it was really not safe. We all the time had this threat. But here now in Afghanistan, which is like more concerned that the women who are still female journalists who are still trying to be and work as a journalist in Afghanistan facing severe restriction and like all efforts to prevent women from working. Covering the face was the thing that the Taliban was telling to female journalists to do that, not just for journalists inside the media in Afghanistan, but even when a reporter was taking a clip from a female out of the country, out of Afghanistan, they were also telling that journalist that tell to her to cover. Otherwise, don't have this kind of clip. And I had a friend, my colleagues in Toulon News, she was explaining this to me that it was just not for cover. It's not just to cover the face. It is just efforts to remove women. And for interviewing, the Taliban official is not the Taliban, not just officials. They don't want to give interviews to the women or response to their request. Even they're not allowed to come in some big conferences when they talk. Like recently, 1 day ago, when they took a big conference, Independence Day in Bamyan. So they said background, sorry. They said that this is not allowed for female journalists. So no female was there. And um, when females are going for some interviews, so the Taliban is telling to the managers that it's better to send male reporters, not female. So it all means that they are blocking the way of female journalists from everywhere. And this is making the media managers to hire more male, not female journalists. And lots of the time, because of this restriction and some of the media outlets who was not able to adopt this conditions or rules of the Taliban, they shut down. And now there is lots of journalists who become jobless. And this restriction on women sometimes making problem even through their families as well. When they see that the Taliban intelligence are asking a reporter, female reporter, to uh, come here and give the response why you did this report or why you use this words that we said before to don't use this kind of word, like for example, like Taliban, they say Islamic Emirates, which is if you say the Taliban, they have a problem with this word. So the families are saying that if the journalism work is like this, don't go. So sometimes not just Taliban, but the environment, the culture thing is also preventing women to go and do their jobs. Although there's lots of threats as well. For example, not for journalists, they even like for YouTubers as well. We had Hura Saudat, who was killed, and nobody is responsible. Nothing is, everything is hidden. Nobody took their responsibility. Nothing is clear how she died. I mean, what was the reason, who called her, nothing. So there is lots of threats, and I think it's not easy for women journalists to do their work when they face gender-based violence, because like not just having their information but the ignorance. I was watching recently a news when even that journalist was there asking the questions but the camera was not taking her face. So the Taliban told this to try to not cover any face of women journalists. So it means that they don't want women or females to work as a journalist in Afghanistan. And this is a very hard situation for women to work, specifically when they are followed by intelligence, their work, their appearance, everything.
Thank you so much, Shagopa, for sharing that, and also for elaborating on it's not just the working conditions of the journalists, but the type of stories that they're able to tell is also impacted as well. Thank you so much. I have a long list of questions I can keep going on, but at this point, I think we're going to turn it over to the audience to ask questions. We do have a microphone here. I would ask that even if you have a loud voice, that you speak to the microphone because it will allow people watching online to hear your question as well. So our colleague Ahmed here has the microphone. I think there's a question at the back.
Hi, my name is Neda. I'm a former BBC journalist. In fact, I don't have a question, sorry. I want to share one of my serious concerns with you that's slightly different from what we talked and heard today. On the third anniversary of Taliban being in power, I just want to share my serious concerns. We all know that Taliban have many restrictions on women, on girls. They are not able to go to school. They are not receiving education. But one thing that we are not emphasizing enough, and that is the education that boys are taking in Afghanistan. We know that maybe in 5 or 6 years, we may have millions of males, Afghan young men, who can be potentially fundamental Muslims or maybe terrorists in the future. This is something that I noticed that we as journalists are not focusing enough on that, because all the time we are saying that women have a hard time, difficult time, which is very true, and we know the consequences of this. But pretend that we don't have Taliban in power in some years, but at least we will have one Talib in every family. Students, male students who are receiving education in Afghanistan under the control of Taliban, they are receiving lessons and educations that potentially will make them like terrorists, suicide bombers in the future. And this is not something threatening Afghanistan as a country or as a nation. It's something that threatens the whole region and the world. Journalists in Afghanistan are not able to cover these kind of sensitive issues from inside Afghanistan. But we, as journalists outside Afghanistan, we can work more on these kind of sensitive issues that are really very concerning. And especially the Western media, I request them to focus on these kind of consequences that in long term threatens the country and every family in Afghanistan. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Neda. Would either of you care to comment on that issue?
Sure. I mean, it's just a pleasure to see Madam Kargar. She's a very seasoned Afghan journalist. Look, the Taliban, one of the first things after they banned girls from going to school above the grade of 6, was to launch a campaign to hire 100,000 madrasa teachers, 100,000 madrasa teachers, and to establish a jihadi madrasa. So with a jihadi madrasa in every Afghan district, we have 400 of them. So this is a serious radicalization, I think, issue, a question for the society. At the end of the day, this is a fundamental question, a battle of lifestyle, the way we want the Afghan society to be, and the way the Taliban wish or try to transform this our society into, whether that's 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road. And that's why I think our job in the media sector in the education sector is very critical to make sure they're not successful in brainwashing, in radicalizing, our society. And media education, I think is education through media is probably something that we all should look into at this stage, because we all, for those of us who remember Taliban in the 90s, we know what they have done to our own siblings, to our own society, to our own generation, and compare them to the generation that we have after 2001. So I think the Taliban, even the way they have tolerated media, local media, to an extent, is to transform the society into a Taliban. And Mr. Rameshpur is here. He has done a lot of work in this area, and he runs an anti-extremism network even here in Canada. He can probably comment more. But I think the Afghan society, I agree with you, that is facing a serious radicalization trend. And don't forget, we have the youngest population in the world outside sub-Saharan Africa. Median age is only 18. So we're very prone to being radicalized. And that should be a national security question, I think, for many people around the world.
Thank you. Shagofa, any comments on that issue?
Well, this is a very important issue. We are trying to do that as a journalist, not just all journalists who are inside the country. Of course, they have their restrictions, but who are outside the country, they try actually. I saw that they're trying to bring every stories that is like very important. It's not, you're not seeing right now the result, but you will see the result after 5 or 10 years, which is very important for the future of Afghanistan, not just Afghanistan, but the other countries as well. Because if these things go are like this for many years, then after 10 years, you cannot find someone, or maybe you find just less people in Afghanistan who's against the ideology of the Taliban. Lots of them will change, maybe because of fear, or maybe some specifically they are who are new generation. They will change by this kind of tools that the Taliban doing, using even media as a propaganda, or using these madrasas to change their mind, to change what they believe or think. So nowadays, if you ask Afghan people, new generation in Afghanistan, they believe in democracy. They say that we want the freedom of expression. Yes, this is important. Media, democracy, having female to work in journalism or other fields. Women should go to schools. When the order of the Taliban come to ban schools for girls, I saw that many men of the families, like fathers, brothers, was saying that we want the education for our family, sisters, or our females, family members. But after 10 years, what will happen? Still, there would be something, thoughts that people will stand, we want education, or maybe it might be changed, because the Taliban effort is that. The Taliban is banning everything and restricting women because they are afraid of women. And then when the woman is banned from going to get education, from working, from going to park, from going to gym, living, everything, then mans are going to like push to go to madrasas and learn what the Taliban want. So what do you think? So it's a big issue. It's a very important things that media should focus on. But with the media, organizations who are supporting media in outside Afghanistan, or journalists inside Afghanistan, they should also do this support more than, because it's not enough. We have media outside Afghanistan, but they need more like personal reporters to be everywhere in Afghanistan and also to cover everything. So for that, there is more need to support media and journalists and individuals, even in Afghanistan or outside Afghanistan.
Thank you, and thank you, Neda, again for raising that issue. Do we have any other questions from the? Oh, okay, go ahead.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sir Habibi. I'm the leader of Youth Center's Parliamentary Group and a government liaison for Dashti Foundation. Mr. Richard Bennett earlier made a great point. He mentioned the phenomenon within the lines of the erosion of truth. And the echoes of this erosion of the truth can be heard by youth outside the Afghan diaspora and even Toronto. The echoes of extremism, the echoes of the propaganda that the Taliban have put forward. And we do understand that there's a huge discrepancy between how youth consume information and how the older generation consume information. Social media has been an outlet or an output for these groups to put out propaganda and radicalize youth inside Afghanistan and outside Afghanistan. Now, my question is, within the streams of the new modus operandi, do you see room for a network of social media advocates to also essentially bring out the truth using the waves of the time, catching the waves of the time, which is the social media? Thanks so much.
Thank you. I mean, social media is media, is not the truth itself. So it's a medium allowing people to transmit information. So you have to have access to information first. I think because of the Taliban's severe restrictions, there is a serious obstacle in accessing information in Afghanistan. So that's why we are dealing with a lot of misinformation, at times fueled and echoed by social media and unverified sources. It's, I think, I mean, media literacy for Afghan audiences at home and overseas is a serious question. My dad once asked me a couple of weeks ago that a particular incident happened in a part of Afghanistan that he used to work. I think the story was that a water dam was blown up. And then I said, Dad, I don't think that has happened. But he was confident that that was happened. So I had to make some phone calls in that particular village to find out what really happened. And the truth was that that story was wrong. But I was still having difficulty in convincing my dad that this is not the fact. So this is the downside, I think, of a polarized society using social media as a medium for misinformation, spreading propaganda. And this is exactly what the Taliban also tried to do with the mainstream media. They turn us into good media, bad media, pro-Taliban media, anti-Taliban media, exile media, domestic media, this ethnic group media, that ethnic group media, right? So the moment you are vulnerable to these categorizations, you are basically making yourself fragile. And this is, I think, particularly in the past 3 years, I see how social media has contributed to more hate within the Afghan society. But this is the downside. We should not also forget that in many cases, I think it can serve as probably the only platform that one can have to express their views, express their frustrations, try to put a message out. So one has to see both sides of it. But in order to have a healthy discussion that there in the social media where it's not only happening in the absence of absolute truth, you must maintain your access to information inside the country. And you must care about details. You must have interest in details. Yes, the country is ruled by the Taliban, but I still want to know what is the Taliban's budget for defense, right? I still want to know how are they basically manning their checkpoints? How are they, why are they putting 17,000 people in Panjshir province, right? So we still need to be interested in some of these details in order to have an informed discussion in the social media. But I mean, like Afghanistan is not the only example when it comes to discussing the pros and cons of social media. But before that, I think we have a serious, as colleagues said, access to information question here.
Shagova, anything to add?
I just want to add that, like media in Afghanistan, Taliban is trying to control social media as well. For example, lots of YouTube channels who are working in Afghanistan inside, they have to register themselves. If they are not registered, then the Taliban will prevent them from like having their programs. So it means that the Taliban, lots of the times, now they are so wise. Now they are knowing how to use social media as well as their propaganda tool. So lots of the times through the social media, they're doing the campaigns that everything is good in Afghanistan and even better than the before, which we know that lots of them is not reality. So we cannot rely on social media a lot because it's individuals who are doing that. And if a big media organization with lots of reporters, rules, everything is trying to do something accurate, we cannot compare that with an individual who are trying to do it by their own self, because it's not easy to do that and have the accurate information. I think it's good to have, but it's also have like social media have its cons and pros. So it's not a reliable resource.
Yeah, we've got a question from Grant. Go ahead.
So first off, thank you for the conversation. Thank you for the work you're doing. It's phenomenal. And I'm glad that you brought up your father, because that's what kind of attaches to my question, which is we all have families. If one thing that's a unifying factor is our families' opinions on what we're doing. Being a journalist is dangerous in Afghanistan. It's also dangerous for your families. I'm so curious as to the conversations you're having as to why you're doing it when they say, couldn't you just be an accountant?
Well, actually, it is something that I should take care of it. I mean, this is dangerous for the family. My family is not in Afghanistan right now, but it's still, it's not keeping us from doing our job. And as a journalist, we should say the realities that's coming to us. And this is not something that I just think and say. This is something that I have lots of connection with my colleagues in Afghanistan because I grew up there, I work there, I have experience like being in media and having the connection with media workers, my colleagues for many years. And when we talk with them and when we talk with other people who are still in Afghanistan and trying to survive and work with the Taliban, they have to, what they eat, but they are surviving. Maybe somehow they want to work in Afghanistan and to survive. When they are witnessing, so they are sharing their experience, what they are seeing with us. And we are not relying on everyone who says that, but with the people who work as a professional journalist in Afghanistan are working still. But in terms of danger, it always been danger and threats for us. I prefer to do my job. I don't want to be silent because something is going on in Afghanistan, that everyone know it's not right. We should have our voice all the time. And we shouldn't be silenced at any cost.
Thank you, Shagofa. Lafula, anything to add on that?
I agree. Well, as our families, who push us to do it sometimes, I think is, look, I mean, I think sometimes, the Afghan society is not really well understood. The Taliban's approval rating is only 15%. Right? Yes, we're a tribal country, Biden says, this country will never be united. I went to the mountains of Kunar and I saw that this was democracy was not made for this society, and that bothers me probably more than anything else. And I think the fact that even today 1,000 journalists are graduated from journalism schools across the country, even now under the Taliban's rule, they have families, right? They know this is a dangerous profession. So this is not my story or Shagofa's story or Zahra's story. This is a story of thousands of Afghan journalists, and of course their families. And this is, I would say, very normal. I don't think this is really anything extraordinary.
Thank you so much. Do we have any other questions? Oh, yeah, maybe we'll do one more question from the audience, and then we'll give an opportunity for some closing remarks.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Rose Danon. I'm from the Walrus. Something that Western media has faced a lot in recent years is eroding trust of the public of media. And I'm wondering if that is something that you have seen experienced in Afghanistan, where the Afghan public what are their attitudes towards the news media, and what has had to be done to build up that trust? Is there any issues with facing eroding trust in Afghanistan?
I think the recent study that I saw was probably a few months ago, that 70% of the Afghan people still get their information through media. And that is way more than the information they get through mosque or through friends and family. And I think that shows that accessing the Afghan people is still easy for the Afghan media. And then they still trust the Afghan media for the information that they receive. But the environment, this duality in the ecosystem, particularly in the case of our country, that you have, of course, 35, 40 million people inside the country, and then you have, 7, 8 million people outside the country. And at times they're in conflict, and then they're fighting each other. This is contributing to that lack of credibility. And I think that sometimes it's a self-inflicted wound, that we do it ourselves. So we have to be very informed of protecting journalism as a profession first, in order to maintaining our credibility. But the Afghan people, I still look at media as a very reliable source. Probably not the way that it was 3 years ago, I must confess, but it's still a pretty credible medium. The way that the media is contributing at dealing with stories has changed. I see more polarization. I see more selective reporting. And that is very unfortunate, because that's exactly what the Taliban want us to do. And over time, then you have no credibility. You can say whatever you want, but nobody is going to believe you.
Shagofa, any thoughts on the level of trust in media in Afghanistan?
Well, media in Afghanistan after the first time of the Taliban, like build a good trust between people in Afghanistan. And I think as still we have, people of Afghanistan have that trust in independent media who are working. And they are still trying to have their information from the media who are working, specifically the media who give accurate and working in a independent way to have the stories out for people in Afghanistan. But still, it's not easy for them as well to believe, because there's lots of propaganda going around, information is going around, which Taliban is using as well. Lots of the media tools for their propaganda, but still, the Afghanistan people, I think the percentage my colleague just mentioned, they have still their beliefs in media, Afghan media.
Thank you. So, some fantastic questions from the audience, and we're grateful for those. And as we bring this panel to a close, I want to offer each of you the opportunity to say a few closing remarks, perhaps focused on what you see the future being for media in Afghanistan.
Thank you. Well, first, I want to thank you and Rachel and the institution for hosting the conversation today. Afghanistan, as I said, is not a lost cause for us. It's our fight. It's an Afghan fight, and we're committed. It's not your fight. It's our fight. I mean, I'm telling our international friends. I'm blaming no one for most of our miseries, and we have to deal with it. Yes, we may need help here or there, but I think what a real erosion in Afghanistan in the past 20 years was erosion of leadership and erosion of ownership of our own country. And we have to take it back. So that is, I think, an important lesson learned for our Afghan friends, as well as the international community. So that's one. I'm an optimist. I believe in the Afghan people. Look at the past 50 years. How many regimes have come and gone in Afghanistan, from monarchy to communism to civil war to no government to Taliban to democracy, and now Taliban back, right? So don't judge people based on who rules them, and maintain your interest in the Afghan society. Look at Uzbekistan. When Karimov was running it, it was an isolated society, and people didn't invest in civil society. There wasn't much interest. After Karimov, the society opened up, but there were no partners on the ground. USAID and others, tried to basically find people to work with them, and we haven't seen much progress. In Afghanistan, yes, the top is rotten. You have the Taliban, but then the society is still there. The 10,000 journalists plus are still there. The women are still there. And 70-80% of the Afghan people wanting democracy, elections, access to education, women's rights are still there. So those are our real partners. And that is what drives us to stay engaged and informed and remain interested and be hopeful about the future. And I think that is also a very promising sign. I see, yes, the Taliban have probably done a lot of bad things, but don't forget, this is a very uphill battle for them to transform the society. And contributions of journalists, given that this is a journalistic event, has been tremendous and enormous in preventing Taliban from transforming the society. So it is going to be an uphill battle for them as well as for us. But this is and also probably a very long one. But we have no other choice to give up on our own people. I don't think that even for a moment, we can't even think about it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and Shagofa.
Thank you, Bill, Rachel, for inviting me and having this discussion. But I want to say that media and freedom of expression is very important for democracy and for making the governments accountable. If you don't have democracy or freedom of expression, you will be not able to see the reality, and then you cannot change what's wrong in the society. I was witness when the first time when the Taliban defeated by the US, and then in this 20 years, like the percentage of girls who is going in the first years that the Taliban defeated by the US to schools was very less. And it was in big cities like Mazar, Kabul. But after some years, and after the media was trying to give awareness to the people, in recent years, it comes up to, like, we had girls who was taking entrance exam in Herat. The percentage of girls were more than boys in Herat. So we can see the changes in the power of media in Afghanistan. And I believe that still that power is there because the journalists are there and they are doing their work under this challenge. Still, even when they are not inside Afghanistan, who they are outside Afghanistan, who are inside, both are working and doing their jobs. Beside that restriction, everything that Taliban imposing on female journalists, we still have them. This is a hope for me, and this is a hope for Afghan people that it might be changed, and we are trying to do our jobs and to keep up, but still there's a need for Afghan journalists, Afghan people to be supported by other organizations, who are supporting media, for example, JHR, or other international community to support more, because there's a lack of resource and financial resource for Afghan media inside Afghanistan, and even some of them struggling outside Afghanistan when they want to do their work and use this platform. So this support is very important, and also doing our job, continuing our job is very important to do it. Doesn't matter how many challenges we face or how many challenges Afghan people, Afghan journalists on the ground are facing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shagofa and Lafula and Zara, who had to leave early, for being with us today and for sharing your story. I think it's really important to recognize that when we're dealing with a topic like the fall of Afghanistan, it's difficult to talk about, and we're very grateful that you took the time today to tell us your stories. I know you're going to say you're journalists; it's your job to tell stories, but it's quite different when it's your own personal story. It takes a lot of strength and a lot of courage, and we're grateful for you coming here today and helping us understand the realities of what it's like to be a journalist in Afghanistan, and the power that journalists, not in exile, but journalists living beyond their borders of their home country, have in communicating messages and promoting human rights. And that's what Journalists for Human Rights is all about. And we're grateful for you for that. We're also grateful for the over 300 journalists who spoke with our colleague Harris about their experience living outside of Afghanistan and serving as a journalist. And that the results of those conversations are in a report that we're going to be releasing later today. So please stay tuned for that. And I encourage you, if you enjoyed the discussion today, this document will be of equal interest to you. And with that, I'd like to just quickly turn it over to my colleague Harris to wrap up the event. Thanks again.
Thank you, Bill, and thank you, Lutfullah, John, Shugufa, and Zara for your inspiring words and for the continuous work that you are doing. And as you echo all of you, all the journalists that they are in Afghanistan and outside Afghanistan, still they are continuing their vital work. And as journalists for human rights, we are still helping journalists that they are outside Afghanistan, in Turkey and in Pakistan. And I want to thank my colleagues, Jordan, Zain, and Soma, which she's here, for the continuous work that still we are supporting journalists that they are outside Afghanistan and need crucial support. But we cannot do this support alone. We need your commitment, your support. Please visit us at jhr.ca. Try to donate, amplify, and keep the conversation continuous. As Bill said, later today, we will share the report with all of you. And thank you everyone for coming. Have a great rest of the day.